Naiset ja herrat, mina damer och herrar, ladies and gentlemen. Me poliitikothan olemme siinä eteviä.
As politicians are very clever in that we can decide what we want to say in advance, irrespective of what is the question. I'm reminded of an event hosted by a former Prime Minister of what happened to another former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Margaret Thatcher. Apparently was particularly famous for being able to decide in advance what she's going to say, irrespective of what she was asked, and it became pretty much a common joke in the United Kingdom that the Prime Minister answers whatever she will. And Madam Thatcher went to a live TV interview, but the journalist decided to do a trick and asked her, Madam Prime Minister, what is your answer to my first question? But Madam was completely answer-plast and answered whatever she thought, and then asked the journalist, would you like me to answer your second question as well? And that's exactly what I feel like when I talk about energy efficiency of buildings and energy questions in terms of housing and building, construction and land use. We've had a number of these stories, and somehow I feel that we are repeating ourselves. Sometimes I ask my civil servants to come up with new answers, but they say that no, I can't do that. I suppose we'll just have to stick to what we've outlined so far. So I suppose that what we'll do now.
An obligation to take more effective action to slow down climate change and reduce greenhouse gases. The central commitment of the EU's climate and energy policy is to reduce greenhouse gases by 20%, to raise the proportion of renewable energy sources of 20% of final energy consumption, and as a guideline value to improve energy efficiency by 20%. All of these targets to be reached by the year 2020. Finland's contribution to achieving these targets is ambitious. As it's well known, the EU system is based on the division into the emissions trading sector, ETS, and the sectors that remain outside emissions trading, the NETS. In the emissions trading sector, due to the nature of the system, no national targets can be set for the development of the emissions. In the non-emissions trading sector, on the other hand, the situation is different. For this sector, Finland has been set the target of reducing emissions by 16%. In the case of buildings, district heating and electricity belong to the ETS. Otherwise, building is outside the sector. Besides buildings, traffic is the most important non-emissions trading sector. In the NETS, the member states can themselves decide how they will achieve the targets set for them. Thus, the building stock has an essential role in the effort to control climate change and to meet our international commitments, both in the ETS and in the NETS, and in the latter sector, its role is absolutely central. The same naturally applies to the separate goal of improving energy efficiency. Improving energy efficiency in all sectors is a justified and even an essential goal if we are to maintain the competitiveness of our export industry. It is indeed important to notice that in addition to climate, many other factors speak for more efficient use of energy in all sectors of society than is at present the case. These factors include the need to guarantee the availability of energy and ensure the country's competitiveness. Rakennusten kokonaisenergian kulutus koko Suomen
energy consumption of a building stock represents approximately 40% of Finland's total energy consumption and approximately 30% of greenhouse gas emissions, and therefore we have a huge savings potential. On a global level, it's estimated that the greatest savings potential can be found in the building stock, and I assume this applies to Finland as well. Energy efficiency improvement has not progressed considerably determined by the markets in terms of demand or offering. In terms of demand, the reason, I suppose, is that we haven't woken up to the demands of climate change yet. Energy prices have been moderate, but people have problems understanding life cycle costs. In terms of offering, the reason for moderate level of R&D can be more difficult to localize, especially when progress in this area could open up considerable export opportunities. This has, however, changed, albeit that it required strong communication of public policy. But I have been very happy to note during this spring that there is a whole new activity in terms of demand and offering. We hope and expect that this activeness reflects not only just necessary adjustment to upcoming regulations. It's clear that improvement of building energy efficiency in new builds requires regulations also in future. This does not, however, exclude the need for other steering measures, voluntary measures, and of course exemplary pioneers. According to the estimate of VTT, the Finnish Institute of Technological Research, we will, by the year 2050, have as much building stock that has been built after 2010 as we have building stock that has been constructed before the year 2010. Building stock, traffic system, and infrastructure are all structures that are slowly renewed in the long term, and of course this is what combating climate change is all about. Sufficiently radical measures are all the more important the more long term their impacts are and the more difficult their impacts are to rectify in future. Buildings are constructed for a use of at least 50, if not 100 years, and any possible mistakes we make today will follow with us for a long time, at least 30, 40 years, until the next major renovation is due. The VTT has also calculated that Finland's total energy consumption would decline by 5% by the year 2020 if all new builds were implemented from now on with a low energy technology. 5% is very much. Climate change, however, cannot be stopped, and our preparations for it won't stop by 2020, and therefore we need to make continued efforts to regulate the energy efficiency of new builds more strictly. As I've often stated, the Ministry of the Environment will submit new building codes that are at least 30% stricter in terms of their regulations, and we will submit our concrete proposal for a new building code next Tuesday for a commentary round, and we want to get these new norms approved still this year so that actors in the sector will have about a year to prepare for their enforcement. Energy efficiency of new buildings cannot, however, be improved only by enforcing and issuing new building codes. To implement them in practice, we need strong R&D inputs in terms of products and in terms of competencies that stems from the sector itself. The new stricter regulations impose new challenges, not only for energy efficiency, but also for cost effectiveness and also for humidity characteristics of structures. This means that structures have to be functional, also with a lower energy throughput. Structures must be designed and implemented so that humidity cannot cause problems, which is what happened the last time we took up major measures in this sector. New, thicker structures or framework structures owing to the new codes requires new design. What is essential when we face these challenges is to understand that even though they may cause some extra costs during construction phase. In the long term, we are still talking about cost savings. For example, in the city of Oulu, the local building supervision has estimated that improving energy efficiency of buildings by 30% will pay itself back in 5 to 8 years. And if we think that a building life cycle is approximately 100 years, it means that for the next 92 to 95 years, the building will incur savings. If and when we can assume that energy prices will only continue to rise in future, payback times will shorten, and of course that will incur more cost savings. The new stricter energy regulations that will be enforced as of 2010 are only one, albeit an important step towards energy efficiency, and we are now preparing a systemic change. We want to move towards a total energy efficiency regulation and the deployment of primary energy coefficients by the year 2012. General requirements would be further made stricter by approximately 20%. We do need a systemic change for many reasons, but most of all because it is not unimportant for combating climate change how the heat that is needed within a building is produced. When we want to improve energy efficiency of buildings, or when we talk about any other energy efficiency points, the important thing is to remember that ultimately we're not talking about energy consumption, but instead the reduction in energy or greenhouse gas emissions. The new regulations that will be deployed in 2012 means that different forms of energy will be observed directly as a part of energy efficiency regulations. Each form of energy will be defined by a primary energy coefficient, which multiplied by the building's total energy consumption by square meter will then define an acceptable minimum level. The aim of the systemic change is to make it more simple, more illustrative and more understanding than the current system. Another equally important aim is to encourage actors in the field for a more wide-based product development. The starting point is that the duty of society and policymaker is to define goals for the change, and the role of the industry and other actors in the field is to find tangible practical solutions for achieving these goals and objectives. It is likely that the new system will encourage a more wide-based R&D than is currently the case. And, of course, hopefully will lead to total solutions that will not exceed the minimum levels. Deployment of such a system will, of course, require wide-based understanding, legislative changes, and political understanding in terms of coefficients for different forms of energy. But the benefits are so undeniable that I think that its deployment in Finland is undeniable, as has been done in many other countries. I've given or held an advisory meeting with Minister Pekkarinen, who's responsible for the energy matters, last week, because I am kind of at the limits of my mandate, but we share the same view that this is the direction we need to head towards. And to this end, we have set up a team between the Ministry of the Environment and the Ministry of Trade and Industry to prepare for this regulatory change. Improvement of energy efficiency in the existing so-called old building stock is very difficult through regulations, if not completely impossible. Different difficulties relating to definitions are also important here. This building stock is very versatile and it's owned and used by many different groups of people, which makes it even further difficult. Therefore, we need several supporting measures. To manage the big picture, we want to set up a roadmap that is based on information steering, financial steering, normative steering, training and research to improve energy efficiency. This roadmap links energy efficiency to long-term property maintenance and information dissemination to sectorial information campaigns and this roadmap is included in the Council of State's decision in principles regarding renovation building that will be proposed in the upcoming months. The aim of repair building or renovation building should be that no renovations that would not improve the building's energy efficiency would be undertaken. In order to make wise decisions in renovations, accessibility to information and the usability of information must be improved. As one measure to this end, we will set up a portal as a hub for renovation building information. We will also set up a multi-channel communication campaign together with different actors to activate property owners and to improve their level of information. The campaign will be linked to testing and research of new practices. A good instrument for promoting energy efficiency in buildings is the energy certificate that was deployed at the beginning of this year. It facilitates everyone's ability to estimate energy efficiency of buildings. It is also very useful for potential house buyers and tenants who can compare different alternatives in terms of their energy efficiency with the help of the certificate. The aim is that this certificate would become a true competitive advantage, that the energy efficiency of a building would impact an apartment or property's selling price. The aim should be obvious. The more energy efficiency impacts the value of the building or the property, the more people will invest in energy efficiency. It is all too common in politics that no matter what you talk about, the first question is, if not from the experts, but from different interest groups, is how will the government subsidize this and how much money has been allocated to this end in the budget? I could perhaps illustrate this through a very brief calculation. We have approximately 2.7 million apartments in Finland. If the state gave €1 to improve energy efficiency, to improve the efficiency of each apartment, that would total €2.7 million for state budget, and therefore it's very difficult to incorporate in the state budget. And of course we can calculate that if we gave €1,000, we'd be talking about €2.7 billion, and €1,000 won't improve energy efficiency of an apartment very much. We need at least €10,000 to achieve anything tangible, and that of course would then reach a total sum of €27 billion. If a measure increases the value of the apartment, well, yes, that would be more than half of the current state budget, indeed. We live in a market economy, and we should try to utilize the market mechanisms, or at least try to impact market mechanisms. Some real estate agents who I regularly meet with often say to me, how is it possible that in Helsinki city centre you can sell an apartment with the same price per square meter, for example, in adjoining blocks that are located very close to each other, may even have the same views, etc. But one housing company is well maintained and the other one is in need of major renovations. That's not how it should go. Market mechanisms do not work optimally. The more energy efficiency of a building impacts the buildings or an apartment that's located in the building, its selling price, the more certain we can be that housing companies and also individual house owners will invest in the improvement of energy efficiency of their properties. Although we need many different measures, I am fully convinced that if we can harness market mechanisms to promote this issue, we cannot find a better or more efficient way of doing it. At the moment, energy certificates are mainly planned for new builds, and of course property owners and contractors are mainly interested in the placement of their property on this energy efficiency scale. But next year we will deploy similar certificates for selling and and renting of apartments. That, of course, gives us an excellent opportunity to find out cost-effective ways of saving energy with the help of an expert. I am well aware of many difficulties related to housing construction and renovation, but let us work together and develop them towards better. This is one tangible tool that we can impact market mechanisms with. Improvement of energy efficiency can, of course, be supported with subsidies and is already subsidized. Such subsidies have reaped good results in improving energy efficiency and property maintenance. We have also improved people's amenity and healthiness of housing and systematic maintenance of housing. We will enforce stricter regulations for such subsidies, hopefully by increasing the amount of subsidies. In the future, we hope to be able to set a specific obligation to improve energy efficiency for the granting of such subsidies. It's also important not to forget the huge potential of taxation as a steering measure. It's not hugely difficult to develop, for example, the deductions available to households or property taxation system, or then, for example, to grant VAT exemptions in terms of energy efficiency. I'm very happy to note that energy efficiency of buildings has been recently a very topical point of conversation. However, the diversification of infrastructure has not been discussed as much. The benefits of energy efficiency improvements are lost if the buildings are located inappropriately or wrong from a climate change policy perspective. 1/5 of Finnish GHGs derive from traffic. A diversified infrastructure increases traffic and therefore increases greenhouse gas emissions. This applies to the entire Finland. In fact, a major part of negative environmental impacts of traffic are a result of a failed urban planning, and we should not at least repeat such mistakes in future. In some parts it's difficult, if not impossible, to intervene with the problem because the buildings that have been constructed will stay at least until the next generation's turn is to do something. However, in the areas of new builds, we have to observe the importance of infrastructure in town planning. Integrated infrastructure serves combating climate change, but also people's everyday lives. Good infrastructure means accessibility to services. Good public transportation will facilitate the everyday lives of families with children, the elderly people, and everyone else. Energy consumption and the amount of emissions by buildings and communities are impacted by us citizens with our own choices and consumption behaviors. We can choose, at least to some extent, whether we choose to build our house in a sensible place and how energy efficient it will be. Sensible energy use can easily reduce housing-related energy consumption by 10 to 15%, only by changing our own consumption behaviors. To make the right choices, to be sensible energy users, we need more support, information, education and campaigns related to energy savings and energy awareness. Research shows that houses with an apartment-specific water consumption measurement, the water consumption in them is about 100 liters per capita. But if such measurement does not exist, we're talking about approximately 150 liters. Of course, Finland has plenty of water. That's not a problem. But the heating of water takes up huge amounts of energy. I am fully convinced that the terraced houses that use 1/3 less water than blocks of flats will certainly comply with all sorts of regulations. This is just one proof of the fact that it's the euro that is the best consultant. We have far too many activities, especially in blocks of flats, where people don't have to directly pay for the costs they have incurred. We want to impose compulsory water consumption measurements in new builds, and regulation to this end is already underway. Information should be constantly available, because it's easy to overlook information if the need for information is not acute. For example, whether a type of window is energy efficient is hardly interesting to an ordinary citizen before they are faced with the renovation of all windows in their property. We need strong input and cooperation between all actors in the sector, and not only measures from the government.
Construction industry and real estate sector. In order to succeed in this work, good cooperation is required between the actors involved. The construction industry and real estate sector have not traditionally, compared with other industries, invested very significantly in research and development. More R&D work is needed, as well as many other actions. Experimental projects, the development of new business activities, the conversion of new knowledge into practice, and the activation of citizens, to mention just some of the necessary measures. In terms of improving energy efficiency, it does not make sense to reinvent the wheel over and over again, but rather to apply international best practices here in Finland too. Sitra's energy program for the years 2008-2012 focuses on improving the energy efficiency of the built-up environment. The aim of the program is to start reducing energy consumption while at the same time creating growing prosperity and new business. A further task for the program is to promote sustainable energy solutions suitable for different ways of life and areas. The possible ways of proceeding and choices of means included in the program, about which we will no doubt hear more in the last presentation of the afternoon, are both versatile and comprehensive. Sitra's strong input, expert knowledge and know-how form a good basis for achieving the ambitious goals of the program. And Sitra's energy program is indeed a welcome addition to our joint efforts to control climate change. I have often said that responding to climate change requires persistent and determined work. We need to work consistently, one step at a time, in order to succeed in realizing all the actions aimed at improving energy efficiency. At the same time, we need to make courageous leaps in order to find new ideas and fresh perspectives for the long term. We also need the efforts and commitment of all of us to act towards achieving our common goals. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a rewarding day, and at the same time I wish Sitra every success in the new energy program.
Ministeri, odottakaa hetki vielä. Kiitoksia, ministeri Vapaavuori. Kysymyksiä alkaa tänne virrata.
We are receiving questions and have received questions. In fact, you already answered one of the questions that we got, but I will present one further question to you. What is the government going to do in order to change the network tariff so that it would favor alternative sources of energy? As all former prime ministers, the current prime minister too has instructed me not to comment on things that fall under the competence of other ministers. I would suggest that you put this question to Minister Pekkarinen when he takes part in one of your seminars. Thank you.